Obviously, for anyone in Ukraine or fleeing Ukraine, February 24th marked a cataclysmic shift away from normal life. Over 3.6 million people are now international refugees. And according to the International Organization for Migration, another 6.5 million are displaced inside their own country. But part of the untold story about this war is how quickly and fundamentally life has changed for everyday Russians, too. It's not an easy perspective to get in the current climate, which is why we invited our next guest. Joining us to help us understand what has changed in Russia is Konstantin Sonin, a professor of political economy at the University of Chicago's Harris School of Public Policy. He's Russian and was actually living in Moscow on a sabbatical year when the Kremlin launched the invasion. Konstantin, I really appreciate you joining us today.
Hello.
So let's go back to February 24th. You're in Russia. How did you learn about the invasion and what immediately happened?
Okay, I was expecting the invasion, so it looked like that there will be invasion in the next couple of days. So I was checking the news every day when I woke up. So I woke up and saw that the invasion is ongoing.
And so what did you think? How soon did you leave Russia? Why did you leave Russia? What changed?
Okay, I decided to stay because it was not clear mm, how how bad the situation will develop, but it became very clear that the resistance of the Ukrainian army is very stiff, and the Russian army doesn't make a lot of progress. And then, because of the war protests and because many people were deeply unhappy, they started to crack down on opposition. They closed down first the media. I was writing a column. Echo Moskvy was closed, then an independent TV channel was closed. I went there on the day it was closed. Then they blocked Facebook, and I decided that it's time to leave. And after that, they actually criminalized not only what I was posting on my social media, but they criminalized past postings. So you could go get in jail, and people are actually being persecuted in Russia right now for something that they've written a year ago, even 5 years ago, because now it's considered criminal.
So right now, if you went back to Russia today, you would be arrested?
Okay, maybe not outright, but if I write something that I was writing on Facebook against the war when I was in Russia, yes, I will probably first fined, then arrested.
How quickly did all of that happen?
I mean, the things were developing in the wrong direction for a couple of years right now in Russia, but of course they were developing pretty fast since the start of the war.
And for everyday Russians who aren't writing blog posts against the war or anything like that, how has life changed for them?
Okay, I think now a lot of people notice that the life changed because the inflation started to pick up, the prices went up, the exchange rate of the ruble dropped down, and the government basically frozen the currency account, so people cannot withdraw their savings which were in dollars. They could only do this in rubles.
And they also don't have access to Facebook, Instagram, Netflix.
Now, now Instagram is blocked, and there were 70 million Instagram users in Russia. So this actually affects, I think, every second family.
Wow. And I know that obviously there's a lot of people leaving Ukraine, but there's also people trying to leave Russia as well. What can you tell us about them? Who's trying to leave? How hard or easy is it compared to 6 weeks ago?
A couple of hundreds of thousands of people left Russia since the beginning of the war, moving immediately to Istanbul, to Yerevan in Armenia, to Tbilisi in Georgia, or to Baltic countries. A lot of people are just fleeing the regime. People expect economic hardship. People expect political crackdown. A lot of people who were they were not political oppositioners, they were not columnists, they were just expressing their opinion, for example, that they do not want this war, and now this is criminal. You cannot even call the war a war because this is a crime by the new laws. So a lot of people just run because they feared for their freedom, And this is mostly intellectuals, academic, IT professionals, journalists, people who are basically the best brains in Russia.
Well, what do you have to call this if you can't call it a war? What's allowed?
Basically, you could use only those words that are used by the government officials, and they do not recognize that there is a war. They just say that there is a special operation, there are some border skirmishes. You cannot say that there are casualties because this is prohibited to mention casualties from today, from Thursday, March 24. You cannot say that people are being fired because now people are freed from their jobs.
Is it because the economy is failing or because they've expressed something counter to the prevailing
Okay,
winds?
a lot of firms left Russia, a lot of Western brands left Russia, and some of the factories that they were operating in Russia were closed, so people are being laid off. But you cannot say laid off; they are freed from their employment.
What's the scale of this? You're a political economist. Can you give us a sense of how big of an impact all this is having?
Okay, the economic impact, it's not immediate, although the exchange rate change was huge. So ruble lost about 30 to 40%. And of course, the fact that currency is no longer, that you can no longer buy dollars affects everybody because for ordinary Russian, buying euros or dollars is the best protection against inflation. But it's not yet like serious economic hardship. It's just that there are certainly tough times ahead.
What do everyday Russians really understand about the current situation, about the war or the military action, about why the economy is changing?
I think people know that something goes deeply wrong. They know this because McDonald's left, because a lot of other shops are closed. They don't no longer have Netflix on their apps. They no longer have, I think, Disney. They Russian teams no longer participate in sporting events, and this is a huge thing because even in Soviet times, even during the Cold War, the Soviet teams and the Soviet national team participated in all kind of sporting competition. So people know that something is deeply wrong, but they also get a lot of the information is extremely sanitized. So they basically get only government propaganda, and the government tries to block every independent media, every basically source of information. Western media is also blocked. The journalists are being criminally prosecuted if they call the war a war.
How does the situation right now compare to Soviet times?
Okay, it's not yet there. I would say that the totality of the control, like the fact that you could be punished for just saying something, even for sending, I don't know, private information on your messenger, you could be prosecuted. This is like in Soviet times, but it's not yet that bad economically.
At the very beginning, we saw that there was protests in various cities. There were thousands of arrests. We haven't heard much since. What do you know about that?
Okay, I think people in Russia now fear to go to protests because people get arrested. They get normally if you just go to a protest and you are being detained there, you get 15 or 30 days in jail. But regularly people get 1 year or a couple year terms.
So they're not going on any longer, to your knowledge?
Like basically every day we hear about some detentions and arrests, but these are more like individual protests rather than any kind of organized event.
From the outside, the main protest that we've seen is the Channel One Russia producer employee that went into the live broadcast and held up an anti-war sign. It sounds like she was released with a fine. How significant was that protest, do you think, to people in Russia?
I think this was pretty significant, and people did pay attention to this episode because this Channel One, it's just like state propaganda. Whatever they say, this is only the state line. And I mean, there is no war in Ukraine. There are some border skirmishes. Our troops are welcomed, are greeted as liberators, and then suddenly there is a person who appears and says, "Stop the war." Okay, this was I think this was very unexpected, so people enjoyed it and loved this, and there was a lot of excitement about this episode.
Was it circulating around, I guess, private chat channels? How did people find out?
I've seen people circulating this on this social media to the extent the social media operate in Russia, and of course people shared this privately.
We've got to close out now, but I have one more question for you. What on the outside should we be paying attention to inside Russia?
Okay, I hope that we will get better information about the state of the economy. We will see how people react in their daily lives, where they keep hoarding sugar and other things. I think these are the things to watch.
All right. Thank you very much for joining us today, Konstantin. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Be sure to watch the entire episode, available on epochtv.com, a new completely censorship-free premium subscription platform, brought to you by the Epoch Times. See you there.